Thank you. Okay, so thank you for inviting me to speak here today for, 6 minutes, especially because the project is really at the very beginning stage and it's really up for funding. I'm just starting this. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, I'm a sociologist of religion encountering humor studies, which is really an interesting experience. So why study religion and humor? I won't say it, you can read the slide about the essential function of humor in human life, and especially with religion. And religion and humor interactions. So how do those two meet? I'm using humor and religion really as umbrella terms. So I've explained what some of the notions of humor and religion. But examples, how do they meet? They can meet, for example, in the presence of humor or laughter in religious traditions, in texts, or in religious practice. There is humor about religion, which is what I'm going to talk about, and then there are a lot of studies on religiosity and humor appreciation or creation. And religion and humor, we know quite a lot about how, the explosion. So we know very well, especially from cartoons, how religion and humor can really clash, leading to conflict and jokes going horribly wrong. And I sort of quickly summarized here what some of the very opposite characteristics of religion and humor, which can lead to offense, to legitimize prejudice, to trigger conflict, and to divide people. However, what we know less about is what do they share in common, and what is what I call their symbiotic relationship, or their superpower, if there is one, into making a very powerful combination towards making something, leading to something positive, and especially in interfaith relations. But the big question is how, whether and how they can actually work together. Which brings into my project, which is what this project aims to answer, and to shed some light as to how humor can function as an innovative tool in interfaith practice in terms of impact, but also reach. And I'm very sensitive and very aware of Kitty's presentation this morning about how you measure effectiveness and impact. For example, interfaith, what are, in terms of interfaith organizations, what are the views and experiences of interfaith practitioners on the role of humor and laughter in faith engagement, interfaith engagement? Is it used? Is it not used? Which is probably mostly the case, and why not? What are the risks and the fears? And then looking at comedy, and I'm looking more on stand-up comedy, who makes fun of whom and about what, which I think is a key question, and which can help whether a joke will go horribly wrong, is what types of humor can really contribute to the effectiveness of interfaith work, and under what conditions. And then, so there are what I call four key players in the relationship. There are the interfaith organizations, or organizations that engage in interfaith work, comedians, what I call interfaith comedians, who self-identify as Jewish, Christian, Muslim, or other. They perform alongside each other, and they poke fun at religion. And we had an example of that on October 10th for any of you that were here. And also interfaith participants who participate in interfaith events, and the audiences of comedies. So in terms of the methodology, what I'm proposing myself to do is looking at interfaith practice. Identify key interfaith organizations in the UK, conduct interviews with interfaith leaders or practitioners and participants. And also do some participant observation. then on the comedy side, really look at what interfaith comedy shows or outputs or productions there are, with comedians, featuring comedians from different backgrounds all together. Do interviews with them, do a qualitative content analysis of the shows, see what do they make fun of, what do they talk about, who makes fun of what, as I mentioned earlier, and also look at the reviews that they get and the audience responses. And then when I say comparative casing, I mean the focus would be in the UK and London and Birmingham. I sort of picked those two cities, but I will also look in terms of what interfaith comedy shows and outputs there are. I would also like to see what goes on in Europe and North America. And I know, for example, some similar shows in France and in Canada and in the US. And the last slide. And in terms of outputs, the project will aim to really have obviously a traditional final report, have some kind of a policy paper that would be geared to for interfaith organizations and practitioners of how they could integrate humor in the interfaith practice, a podcast, and also events such as an academic conference, some practical workshop, bringing together interfaith leaders, comedians and religious figures, and then some public talks. And then last, anybody who's interested in this topic, I've co-founded this network. And then last, my joke, which is not really a joke. So this is a kind of a funny thing. And then this is Ashley Blaker and Imran Yusuf, who were here on October 10th. And I will, there's the next slide, I think. Yes, that's it. I'm done. Thank you.